Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. And this time I'm talking about episode 8 of Binbogami Ga. Well, this is, I think, an episode that really kind of culminates the character growth we've been seeing from Ichiko since the start of the series. This is where she does achieve a very serious breakthrough in terms of her character. But we'll get to talking about that in a minute. First of all, let's start talking about the anime shoutouts that we saw in this episode. The most obvious one, I think, was the little shot with Momiji dressed as Detective Conan from Conan Edogawa from Detective Conan. Another long-running fan favorite shonen series. Of course, we have the hockey mask and the chainsaw. Very obvious reference to the Friday the 13th horror movies. So it's kind of nice to see a reference to something from the Western media in this show. Oddly enough, apparently those Friday the 13th movies are rather popular in Japan because I've seen them referenced quite a few places. Not really sure exactly why. I've never particularly cared for them myself, but hey, taste is relative, right? Of course, we saw another shout out to One Piece, and I believe when we saw that suplex on at the very end, I'm pretty sure that was probably a shout out to GTO. Very funny series. Bit of a bit old school these days, but still really worth your time to go and check out if you ever get the chance. I absolutely loved it. But anyway, let's get into what's going on with our characters here. So our main focus this episode is Ichiko. And as we've seen over the course of the series, we've seen her deal with how she has Sawano, the only person in her life that she's cared about. And there have been hints throughout the series that Ichiko is this very selfish person because of her past, of people abandoning her parents not being there. And here we finally get to see a lot more insight into why she doesn't have any real friends. And it's a very simple story, but it's very effective because who hasn't known someone like Kurumi? Someone who acts like your friend but is really just there to manipulate you and use you for your own gain. And no matter how old you are, if you're a kid or if you're an adult, when you discover someone you thought was your friend is like that, it hurts and it does leave a real mark on you. And in a lot of ways, Ichiko hasn't really dealt with that. She hasn't really left that childhood, that childish part of that. Can't talk. In a ways, she really is still that child, that hurt, betrayed child. Look at the way she just absolutely breaks down when she's having that argument with Ranmaru at the very end. It's just that endless, like, you will. Exactly the way a young child would behave. And I won't lie, I honestly felt touched when Ranmaru really managed to get through to her, and Ichiko just simply asked her, you really won't hurt me. You really won't betray my trust. Again, just the way a child would. And it's things like that are very simple, but I do feel that they are very effective. Sometimes, the mistakes and hurts and traumas that we all have from our childhood, it's really amazing how they stick with us through our lives. Even silly, petty things. And, oh boy, I'm just really having a hard time focusing this time around. But, again, this is the culmination of Ichiko's character. She has, despite her insistence that she's doing these things for her own reasons, or because it falls within her very narrow parameters of being able to give a damn about anybody else. When it is really driven home to her that if she doesn't do something that Ranmaru is going to die, well, she needs a little bit of a kick in the butt, but she goes out there and she does save Ranmaru. Is willing to sacrifice her fortune in order to save Ranmaru's life. And she is, most importantly, willing to place some genuine trust in her. And this is of course a big thing for Ichiko. And overall, I think this growth, this change in her character was handled really well. Now, before I get into what's going on in terms of character with Momiji and Ranmaru, I did feel that this episode was a little rushed. It really did kind of feel like they were trying to cram what was essentially two different stories from the manga into one episode. And because of that, I think the pacing and the storytelling suffered a little bit, but not enough to make this a bad episode. Now, in terms of Ranmaru's character, we see more of her. Well, she's basically decided Ichiko's my friend, and I'm going to act like the way a friend does. And of course, Ichiko really has very little experience in dealing with friends because she's been pushing everyone away since she was, probably maybe 7 or 8 years old. I mean, that's literally, she's been pushing people away what literally has to be half of her life. For half of her life, she's only ever had one person that she's cared about, and she's never really had a friend. So, and of course, she tries to push Ranmaru away. But fortunately for Ichiko, Ranmaru is not somebody who gives up easily. And also good for Ichiko, Ranmaru is somebody who's really able to see through her BS pretty well. Now, granted, Ichiko was able to trick her at the beginning of last episode, but that's when Ichiko was just a complete stranger to her. Now that Ranmaru's had the chance to get to know her a little bit and see a little bit of what Ichiko is like under the mask, she's got a pretty good read on her. And that's very fitting with Ranmaru's character, and it's important because somebody who has a very good read on her is not something that Ichiko really can deal with very well. Here Ranmaru actually reminds me a little bit of Xander from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And if you remember the later seasons, there's a point where the bad guy, Caleb, refers to Xander as the one who sees. And this was really just a reference to, despite all the craziness going on around him, despite how everybody around him in so many ways was more powerful than he was, Xander still did have that ability to really see them for who they really were, to get past the things that made them extraordinary, the things that made them powerful, and really get to who they were as people. And I mean, just look at his whole yellow crayon speech that literally saves the world. Well, to a lesser degree, I think Ranmaru is that sort of character for this series. But we'll see more of that aspect of her character later on, I think. Now, it's time to turn our attention to Momiji. Now, again, there's really not much going on with Momiji personally. We're just seeing a continuation of her acting as the Obi-Wan to Ichiko. For whatever reason, Momiji has taken an interest in Ichiko's development as a person and is there acting as that stealth mentor. And she's helped. She offers Ranmaru that magical item to really get a read on Ichiko's character that Ichiko is probably not going to be willing to provide of her own free will. And it is a testament to Ranmaru's character that she says, no, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to do this properly. I'm going to get her to tell me this because she wants me to understand her. She wants me to know these things about her. And again, that's a very nice character moment, a very nice character decision, and one that pays off in spades in terms of the plot. Now, and of course, the whole acting as this sort of bizarre mentor to Ichiko just really makes the relationship that she and Momiji have just so much more interesting because, as I've said, if it's just Momiji wants to take Ichiko's fortune every episode, then their relationship is nothing more than Tom versus Jerry. By one sort of acting as her friend in a really sort of odd way, even though neither one of them is ever really going to admit it, and to another degree as her mentor, this makes Momiji a much more interesting, much more dynamic character. Now let's see here. Oh yeah, before we move on and talk about some other things, one more thing to say about Ranmaru. Have you noticed how much she really seems to enjoy saying her name when she's about to fight people or when she's making fancy speeches? She does have that little bit of that Leroy Jenkins aspect to her character, doesn't she? Just a little observation. I thought I'd throw that out there. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Leroy Jenkins is a reference to some stuff, a very famous World of Warcraft video. Seriously, just throw Leroy Jenkins into YouTube. You'll find it. It's actually quite funny. At least I have chicken. Oh boy, yeah, that year I spent playing Warcraft, that was time well spent. But anyway, let's talk about my main problem with this this episode, and this is that simply the girls that organize Ichiko's kidnapping and what was clearly going to be a gang rape, they don't suffer any consequences for this. And the four guys that were going to carry out the gang rape, nothing happens to them except that two of them get knocked out by Ranmaru. Now, in the manga, they were actually going to videotape this and spread it around just to screw with Ichiko even further. And after all this is over, when she wakes up, first of all, one of the first things that Ichiko said is, I don't need Ranmaru's help. I'd have woken up in a few minutes anyway. Ichiko, in a few minutes, you would have been short your virginity given what those guys were planning to do to you. So, yeah. And I'm glad they did sort of dial it down a little bit because, well, there really is not a whole lot of place for gang rape in what is primarily a comedy series. Now, another aspect of that scene is that in the manga, these guys who were going to do this were some dudes that Ichiko had, tried to get Ichiko to hang out with them, and she'd just blown them off rudely. So again, that added, I think, a little bit more depth to what was going on. And did you notice that that knife that one guy was waving around? Now, if I understand it correctly, that's a butterfly knife, which is illegal. Actually, pretty much everywhere. Those have been illegal in the United States for a very long time, and given the weapons laws in Japan, I'm positive they're illegal there. I mean, gravity knives of all sorts have been illegal in the U.S. for decades. Now, I personally find that kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's a knife. Why are we making knives illegal? But, hey, who knows? And of course, after all it's over, nobody, Ichiko, Momiji, Ranmaru, none of them think that this kidnapping and attempted gang rape is worth reporting to the police. So, yeah, you can go out and attempt to gang rape a teenage girl in this series, and nobody's going to think that the cops should maybe do something about you. Then again, given my personal experiences with the Japanese cops, to some degree I actually can't blame them for not doing this. And believe you me, I've got a lot of things I could say about Japanese cops, but that's not really the place for this. But to illustrate my point, I'll tell you briefly about what happened when I was living in Japan and my bicycle was stolen. Well, naturally, after I realized my bicycle was stolen, I did what everybody would do is I went down to the police station and tried to file a report about it. The cop I was talking to literally had to get on the phone and call another police station and have them walk him through the procedure for filling out the form for a stolen bicycle. Keep in mind, folks, this is a fully trained, paid police officer who needs other cops to tell him how to fill out a form for a stolen bicycle. Amazingly enough, I actually did get my bicycle back, and it was because said cop simply, not that he actually figured out who took it and caught them, it was just whoever took it just rode it around for about a day and then dumped it down by the river. Most likely whoever stole it was probably just some kids from the local junior high school who just felt like riding around on my bike for whatever reason. But, yeah. So, not terribly impressed with Japanese cops. Well, folks, that's all I really have for you this episode. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And until next time, you can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. So, until next episode, take care and have a good one.